I'm Joe Midiri from Cole's Music. I chose that passage of music to play because I wanted to talk about something that I'm doing and describe what I'm doing and well, let's just say it's part of playing that I think is my favorite part of playing, and I call it voicing. When we play an instrument, just because we're using the correct fingering or what mouthpiece we use or what reed we use or what instrument we're playing, that doesn't mean the correct note's going to come out. To a large extent, what's actually happening is we're singing the pitch we're playing. We all do it naturally. One time I had a student come in, and it was in August, and it was like 105 degrees outside. And the student comes in and he sits down, and everybody's just hot. And he's taking his instrument out, put it together, and I pick up my instrument and I start playing Jingle Bells. And he turns to me, he says, "Ha ha, very funny." And I says, "What?" And he says, "What you're playing." And I says, "Well, what am I playing?" And he says, "Well, Jingle Bells." And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yes, you are." He said, "No, I'm not." He says, "Yes, you are." He says, "That's Jingle Bells." And finally he says, "That's Jingle Bells because I know how it goes." Think of how many tunes you can recognize just because you hear them. And if you can recognize a tune because you hear it, you can pretty much sing it, or I call it voicing it. When we play an instrument, just because we're using the correct fingering doesn't mean that's the note that's going to come out. So what we learn to do over a period of time is to voice the notes, so that's the pitch that comes out. Those of you who play saxophone or clarinet, when you first went into the upper register, I bet you it didn't sound very good at all. Usually it sounds very strained, under pitch. But over a period of time, the notes start to sound better and better and better. In fact, when I work on the high range with a student will say to me, "I don't like playing those notes because I don't like the way they sound." And I say, "Just keep playing them. They'll sound better." And what happens over time is you learn to voice it. So for example, G, top line G on the clarinet. Do you remember when you were in your beginning stages and you were first going into the upper register, how bad that note sounded? And now you probably pick up the clarinet and play that note and it comes out like nothing. You're voicing it and you don't even realize it. But I think what we need to do is train ourselves to continue to play that way. Not that long ago, a friend of mine and I were watching a video of a band playing, and we were noticing that the baritone sax player, is whenever he changed notes, his jaw, his embouchure was moving all over the place. That's not a fun way to play. In fact, it's a very hard way to play, and also the intonation suffers. If we learn to just keep everything here relaxed, the embouchure does not produce the sound. It's a combination of air and voicing. That's pretty much what it is. A lot of times I'll have a student that plays out a tune. I think this is really interesting, and they seem to be unaware of how out of tune they're playing. So I'll say to them, "Do you have a piano in your house?" And or a keyboard, and they'll say, "Yeah." And I'll say, "How many times a day do you just walk past the keyboard?" And they'll say maybe 20 times a day. I said, "Just walk past doing something else." And they'll say, let's say 20 times a day. I said, "Every time you walk by, don't even look at it, just strike a note and try to sing that pitch. Match the pitch. And don't worry if you miss. Then you go by next time, do it. Don't have to be the same note, but just as you go by, just hit something and then try to sing it." Within a week, their intonation remarkably gets better. So how do we get started with this? Well, one of the things we have on all instruments is overtones. So if you play flute or if you play a brass instrument, you're already used to that because you're playing partials on different valve combinations on trumpet, for example. On a woodwind instrument, those partials still exist. In fact, I always had to laugh. Brass players always look at me and say, "Ah, you woodwind players, all you have to do is press the right key and the note comes out." That's not really the case. We're doing the same thing a brass player does. We're just not as aware of it, I guess. So anyway, to get you started on voicing, one of the things I'll say to a student is, I'll pick an easy note. So I'll say, "Play a low C," and they'll play a low C. I'll say, "Go up to G," and they'll play, which is on clarinet, the 12th. Same fingering, just adding the register key. I said, "All right, now play the G and imagine you're singing that G. And let go of the register key and see if you can keep the pitch where it is." So in other words, if I play C, that's without the register key. And just practice that register. In other words, the second register of the clarinet without the key, but by playing the note, then releasing the key. G is an easy note to start with on clarinet, and then A and B and C. When you get into the right hand, it gets trickier because you're farther from the mouthpiece. But eventually you'll be able to play the whole second register without that key. After that, there are overtones above that, but that's for a later video. But for an example, I can play C without moving any fingers. Here's your C. Here's your G. Now, people look at me and say, well, you're doing something with your embouchure. I'm doing nothing with the embouchure. In fact, for me, I play double lip, so my teeth aren't even on the top of the mouthpiece. But what it is I'm vocalizing the notes. And as I said, if you practice, I tell people, practice striking the note on the piano, matching the pitch. Once you can match the pitch, practice singing the octave. And then when you get that feeling of what it's like to sing in different registers, you'll know. You'll get to the point you'll be able to pick up the clarinet, finger a low C, and get a double A. Say, that's what a low C fingering. The clarinet is the oddball instrument. All of the other instruments use a normal overtone series. So you get an octave, and then you get a fifth, and you get the octave again, and so forth. The clarinet, it makes no sense at all. Off of the low C, we get a C. The next overtone is the G. The next one is the E, and the next one is the A above that. So don't look for it to make sense. But the same thing does apply with the saxophone, in the sense that we're going to try that octave. And the idea is, do not move the embouchure. The embouchure is not what's doing this. It's what happens behind the embouchure. Combination of air and where you're aiming the air, the voicing. So if I play a low G on the saxophone, and if I add the register key, or the octave key in this case, because it is going to be an octave, what I would suggest is play the G, go to the octave, think of singing that pitch, let go of the octave key, and see if you can sustain that pitch without the octave key. So in other words, and that's without the octave key. And you do that for a week or so, and after a while, you'll be able to pick up the saxophone and play the second register without even starting with the octave key, because you'll learn, muscle memory will tell you exactly where that note is. And remember, it's not with the embouchure. It's with voicing, where you're aiming the air. And as I said in the beginning, this is, to me, the most fun thing about playing. And because it puts you in the driver's seat, puts you in control over every note is. If you can play the high notes on the saxophone, the high notes on the clarinet, using the low note fingerings, in other words, without the register key or the octave key, imagine how much easier it is with those keys. Now, a student always asks me, why do they have the key? If we can play those notes without that key, well, those overtones are not naturally in tune. And so when we play, for example, when we play the overtones on the clarinet, and we add the register key, you can hear how it adjusts the pitch. In other words, there's a slight change in the pitch of the note. So that register key is a helper to put the note where it belongs. But as I said, this is an exercise that I find really enjoyable and makes playing much more relaxing and enjoyable, because you're not depending on that embouchure. It's more like you're just singing. You're not even using an instrument. So enjoy. Thank you.